Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Anna Glavinsky and you are live with Cycling UK for episode 3, season 2, Bants, Bikes and Being Female. This season is all about cycling through the winter because we know that there was a huge surge in people taking up cycling through the summer, and we want people to continue with that love and realise that even when it's a little bit colder, a little bit gloomier, and there are certain amendments and things you have to do to put in place as well, you can still continue to cycle through the winter and it can be thoroughly enjoyable as well. Don't worry about it. So we're going to be talking about how to look after your bike through the winter. You want your bike to be maintained and you want it to last all the way through to the sunnier months as well. So we're going to be talking to you through some top tips today with our expert guest. But I just want to give you a little reminder that in 3 weeks' time, I can't believe how quickly this winter is going, to be fair. We're already halfway through the season of Bants and Bikes. And in 3 weeks' time, we have got our Christmas special. So here on Bants, Bikes and Being Female, we're going to be doing loads of fun things, silly games, prize giveaways. We want you to get involved as well. So get ready with your Christmas hats and your party things, anything that you want to throw in there. Make sure you stay tuned on the 18th of December. But later on that evening, we have got our special Christmas fundraiser. So we're doing a bit of a fundraising push for Cycling UK, Break the Cycle, and we're trying to reduce social isolation using bicycles, obviously all with safe social distancing as well as raise money for loads of our charitable work. We do amazing things for cyclists at this charity. So please do put on the 18th of December in your diaries. In the evening, we've got some star guests, loads of fun, and get ready to put your fingers in your pockets to help out this amazing cause. Can't wait to see you there on the 18th. But let's carry on with today. How to look after your bike in the winter. We've got our usual mix of guests. They know everything there is to know about cycling, although admittedly, some I think are a little bit better than others when it comes to properly looking after your bike. So let's find out what they've got to say. Fran, should we welcome you onto the screen?
Hi, Anna.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Lovely to see you back. I know that most people will know you by now, but assuming there's a few more new viewers, why don't you just go in with a little, very quick intro about who you are and your background in cycling?
Okay, I'm Fran. I'm from Velevixen. We're an online women's cycle clothing retailer trying to be the home of women's cycling kit. I've cycled myself for 25 odd years, started in mountain biking, cyclocross and road riding. So a little bit of quite a few disciplines, but not yet all.
Still things to be ticked off. That is the joy of cycling, isn't it, though? There's so many aspects of it.
That and there is not enough time to do all of them.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. All right, Charlene, do you want to join us?
Hi, Anna and Fran. Hi.
Welcome back to our Friday lunchtime chit-chats.
This is actually what I look forward to every week. I'm like, get to Friday for that chat. Come on. It's brilliant.
I've been really enjoying it. And actually, anyone who's been enjoying it, we know that we have a few sort of core guests who come back, core audience, should I say, who come back each week. We're loving your comments. We love your questions. So do say hello into the comments. Let us know where you're watching from, whilst Charlene gives us a little bit of an introduction about herself.
Yes, so I'm an ex-professional cyclist. I've done disciplines of the track and the road, sprint and endurance, and now I am a fitness instructor and expert. So I've got online programs that include HIIT, so high intensity interval training, yoga, mobility for athletes, for cyclists, for normal people, and basically, yeah, just working on all-round fitness for everybody now, and it's just absolutely great. But excited to give my points across for today's topics.
Some of that extra stuff there is so important for cycling, and winter is actually a brilliant time for embracing some of the extra things you can do that benefit your cycling that isn't actually cycling. Like I'm trying to stretch more and massage as well. I'm trying to massage more because I've got this handheld massager and it's amazing, and it's made me realize just how tight some of my leg muscles are permanently.
Yeah. So people like, you know, everyone's like, let's exercise, keep fit, do this, do that, and that's all great, but what you have to understand is the more you exercise, the more muscle you're going to get, which means you're going to get stronger, but you're also going to need to look after that muscle through stretching, like you said, through recovery, through what you eat, through sleep, and also through your mobility as well, training and just doing the balance. So the training and then the rest and recovery. So, yeah.
You might want to do a special shout out because we've got some of the audience messaging in, and there's a bit of a contingent from Scotland. Hi Margaret, hi Tracy, Charlene, you'll be pleased to hear that.
Hi Scotland!
And I'm going to say hi to Nicola tuning in from London. That used to be my neck of the woods. Where in London? I was from Croydon. Okay, and Sylvie, you're also London based. Why don't you come and say hello?
Right, hello everybody.
Hey.
Really happy to be here. I'm Sylvie Vargas. I'm a BMX athlete. I'm also a BMX coach. I'm a mechanic. I'm also like a fitness coach. So a range of a bit of everything really. So, yeah,
cool, we're going to definitely be leaning on your mechanic skills today, that's for sure. And where are you based in London?
I'm in South London. So I'm in Brixton area. Yeah. I don't know if anyone is from there.
And Fran wants to know, where are the Welsh? Where are you guys? Anybody watching from Wales, give us a shout out in the comments. And we've got a new face joining us today, but she's going to be here with us for the rest of the series. So becoming part of the gang. Vicky, welcome on board.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
So give us a little bit of a background about yourself, especially in aspect of cycling and in today's topic about looking after your bike.
Yeah, cool. So I'm also a bike mechanic. I predominantly am an event mechanic and for chain reaction, and I also teach mechanics. But in terms of cycling, I'm a mountain biker. I ride gravel, and I do a lot of riding with my daughter who's got special needs. So I'm representative of the inclusive cycling side of things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And just a little bit about that with your daughter and her special needs. I remember speaking to you once before on a webinar talking about all different types of inclusive bikes, and you ended up being sort of part of a club or a community of people that end up needing to find different ways of cycling. So just tell us a little bit about that world and about the options that there are out there for people.
Yeah, definitely. So my daughter's got a unique mutation, which means she has a mix of cognitive and physical disabilities. So for us, we weren't sure if she was actually either going to be able to balance on a bike or, the thought of her controlling a bike was at first quite lethal. I didn't think other people would be safe. But so we put her on a pull-along trike, really, which you can put adults on as well. And then with another friend of mine, Caroline, we've set up the Thomas and Cece Cycling Club named after our children. So Caroline's son, Thomas, is in a wheelchair and Cece obviously comes on the pull along. And we found another already existing cycling club, which has a whole range of inclusive bikes from tandems, three-wheel tandems, trikes that adults can use, bikes that you can put the wheelchair on the front of. It's fantastic. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that when I cycle with her, I do pretty much burst into tears every time. I'm just so happy. It's amazing to be able to get out as a family. It's fab. So in fact, tomorrow we've got our first family, all four of us, cycle ride. We're trying to get we live in Canterbury. Whitstable is about 7 miles away from us on the coast, and there's a fantastic cycle route called the Crab and Winkle, which literally you can take from our house off-road to the beach at Whitstable. So that's the plan for tomorrow. So watch this space.
Sounds like a great Saturday out, and it also sounds like you're not letting winter stop you from cycling at all. So whilst we've got you talking about this right now, in general, apart from just what you're doing tomorrow, where do you normally ride? What bikes do you normally take out through the winter?
Yeah, so I've got 3 bikes. I've got a nuke-proof Mega, which is a sort of an enduro all-mountain full suspension bike, 170 mil of travel, which I absolutely love, and I ride it anywhere from the local trails through to whichever mountains I can find. I've got a Kona Major Jake, which is officially a cyclocross bike, but I haven't been brave enough to do any yet. I might have to talk to Fran. But I tend to ride that on a mix of road and basically I just go through the forests on sort of trails, and just the flightiness of it makes it really fun. And then I've got a Trek hybrid, which I sort of resprayed and did up and put bike packing bars on, and that's what I pull Cece behind. So yeah, so I refuse to be, well, I can't, for my own mental health. I find I need to be out on bikes and out in the light and in the woods. So yeah, winter be damned. I'm out there.
I can't let it stop you. Esther, we're going to move on to Fran with the same question, but Graham's message saying, are blokes allowed to ask questions? Yes, of course they are. The reason this is called Bants, Bikes and Being Female is because we're trying to address the gender gap in cycling. So you may have noticed, it's pretty startlingly obvious that there's a lot more men than women who do cycle, but at Cycling UK, we don't believe that needs to be the case. So we're trying to address that and encourage more women to know that cycling is for them. But of course, there's so much within this chat and all of these chats that everybody can learn from. They really are aimed at people getting into cycling and helping them maintain cycling. So yes, of course, you're allowed to ask questions. And his question is, and I think this might be for you, Fran, a little bit more to answer, what is gravel biking in the UK?
Oh, good question. It's one of those things that we didn't really exist for many years. You just talk about mountain biking, wouldn't you? And it's kind of morphed into this new phrase called gravel biking. And I guess I describe it as it's a mix between road riding and mountain biking. So generally a gravel bike looks a bit similar to a road bike, i.e. drop handlebars, skinny tyres, but they aren't as skinny as road bikes and they are knobbly. And the purpose of it is that you can go off-road on it, but it's not going to be, you're not going to be overbiked on the road. So it might be that we call them in our club 50-50s, where you might do 50% of your ride on the road, but 50% down bridleways, down gravel paths, like fire roads, you get quite a lot of in South Wales around like the Afon Argoed area. That's kind of how I would describe gravel riding, really.
Cool. And is that the sort of riding that you are continuing to do through winter? So just let us know a little bit about where and what you continue to ride in these months.
Yeah, I mean, I did go on a gravel ride last weekend. I say gravel ride, it turned into a bit of a swim because we went across a nature reserve that we knew was probably going to be quite boggy. And it started muddy, that was all fine. And then it turned into, on me, like knee-deep puddles. So you have to really think about where you're going to gravel ride. So around me, there isn't a lot of actual gravel and it's more bridleway riding, which can then become quite problematic in winter with clogging up your bike. So it's thinking about where you live. If you live somewhere like Swinley Forest, that would be a good place for gravel riding, which is down Reading Way or Cannock Chase, not necessarily the Waymark trails, which are more mountain bike based, but somewhere where there's Forestry Commission kind of gravel trails.
Excellent. Cool.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, fire roads are a great way to get to just get into the woods and have a go, and they're all marked on OS maps often. So if you zoom right in, so it's a great way to sort of get out and explore a bit, and build up your confidence basically, and see what you can do with the bikes.
Excellent. And when Fran said about swimming there, I immediately thought, oh, here we go again. About cold showers, getting into lakes. And this just brings us very nicely onto you, Charlene. Cycling through the winter, what bike do you ride? Where do you go? What do you do?
I mean, you said it in your question. What bike? I live in Scotland, as a lot of our viewers do as well. No, I do just ride my winter training bike. So the difference basically, I don't have any really amazing like high spec racing bikes anymore, because when you're a professional, you get given whatever bike the sponsorship is. So you just have to give them back, unfortunately, after the season, or you can buy it. Still expensive, but not as expensive. But basically, in the winter, we ride just like standard winter bikes. So they've got the mud guards on them. They're a little bit heavier, and it just means that when you're doing your long hours, when you go onto your race bike in the summer, it's a lot lighter. So I've still got my training bike, and that's what I commute with. So yeah, just the training bike really. And then if I want a good old session, then I just stay indoors where it's warm and I can get a good sweat on, and I can just be like, I'm just focusing on what I'm doing and nothing else. Still working on the fitness and the lungs and keeping fit for when I want to go for the longer run. Let's be honest, I know, but I've always been like that. See, when I was training as an elite athlete, I was literally, I'd have 4 hours on a plan, and it would just be like, and it would be raining, and I'd say, I'm going to sit on the walk bike. For Fran's face, I know, literally. But see, I just couldn't deal with like the cold hands and the cold feet day after day after day. So like, if I had like a long, like a 2-week block of lots of riding, I would just stay indoors. Sometimes I just stayed indoors. And it was great because I got through all the movies, all the Netflix. This is great.
I guess that goes to show you how everyone is different, and we did talk about this in the first episode. Cycling through winter, everything you need to know. So if anyone is watching, they didn't see that, do check out the first one in this series where we talk about different ways of cycling through winter. Now, to me, I'd rather get cold, wet, and muddy than sit indoors on a bike going nowhere for 4 hours. But actually, I've got a question for you, Charlene, though. That winter bike, when does it come out, and when does the summer bike go into storage? Is there a date that you have, or is it like, oh, it started raining and this is it from now on?
May.
So basically, there's no other bike. That's it. I've just got my winter training bike and I use it in the summer now.
Okay.
But I mean, before it would be, it's usually round about the time where the clocks change. So around about April, March, between March and April, and then that's when I would bring it out, and then same with the putting it back in as soon as it gets a bit cold. Yeah, that's the sign. As soon as you have to put all the layers on, winter bike comes out. Right, come on, come and get me ready on those roads. But yeah, definitely the clock change time.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And finally, on to you, Sylvie. Through the winter, what bike do you ride, and where do you ride it?
Well, because obviously I do BMX, so I do have that dreadfulness whenever it's kind of wet. So it doesn't necessarily have to be rainy. If it was very cold during the night, then you go into a frosty track that is just as muddy or worse. And then you're just like a bit miserable. So I guess it's like, for me, I focus more on like, winter training for me sounds like more gym, less riding, more sprints, less track, and more road bike, because I'm not going to get dirty. So it's like, for me, it's kind of like different from everyone, I guess. But I've had winter training with my road bike, which just made me hate my road bike. It made me hate it. Like, I just, I haven't, only this year, I think, like, some people saw on my Instagram that I did like a 60, like minute ride, and I was like so proud, like, oh my god, for the first time ever, someone got me out. This is amazing. Like, I never do this. After like 3 years when all of that winter training in bike cycling was. So for me, it's kind of like getting back into those motions of wanting to ride a little bit more rather than staying indoors, especially during like this lockdown, because you can't really go to the gyms. Like, everything's gonna reopen again. So it's a bit depressing staying at home. So for every reason for me to kind of get out. So I'm like, okay, I can do like a bit of like 60-minute ride, and I can take it easy, and let's see how it goes. And maybe I can stop somewhere and have a bit of a, something to eat, or go and visit a friend, like from afar and say hello, and then come back to my area type of thing. So yeah, for me, it's kind of less mountain biking, which is a shame, because obviously the trails start becoming really soft because of all of the rain and all of the frost. So yeah, it's almost like just getting strong and fit, trying to stay as fit as possible, really.
Yeah, and trying to keep it going. It sounds like all of you have adapted your cycling in some way through the winter, whether it's going to use indoor watt bikes a bit more. Some of you do less road and more off-road, and some of the other way round, which is really interesting. Again, it just goes to show how versatile cycling is. And there is ways of keeping cycling through the winter and keeping that motivation up. You don't have to go and get cold all the time. There's so many ways of adjusting that, which is really cool. But again, I think most of that, it was covered in the first episode on everything you need to know about riding in winter. So if this is a topic that interests you, go and head that out. But now we want to talk about cycling being quite brutal on your bike in the winter. It poses all sorts of challenges. So Charlene was saying that she actually puts her summer bike away and pulls out a winter bike. Why is that?
Because yes, as you said, all the elements just tend to break down all the parts of the bike, and it just gets really muddy and disgusting. So you have to clean your bike after every time you use it, basically, in winter. In Scotland, anyway. Probably actually 95% of the time, I would say in winter you need to clean your bike. Yeah. Just to maintain it so that all the compartments are working correctly.
Yeah. And what sort of maintenance do the rest of you guys do on after winter rides? That sort of, well, let's get a feel for each one of you. Like, what is your level of maintenance through winter? Fran? Oh, God, Charlene, as we've got you.
I'm going for it. So basically, I am your poster girl for what not to do. So don't not wash your bike every time you go out. I'm telling you what you need to do, right? Learn from my mistakes. So basically, yeah, I wash my bike once a week, and I use it maybe like 4 times, and that's not enough. But I live in flats, and it's just an absolute nightmare. So yeah, that's my excuse, really. I should really look after it more, because it'll last longer. It'll last
for sure.
That's exactly the point. Do you also think, I wonder if maybe you got a bit of a slack attitude, because I know that I fell into this camp before as well. When you're riding at a pro level and you're lucky enough to get bikes for free, we forget actually what a luxury that is. And most people's bikes are really something precious to be valued, because they're not going to get a new one next year. So if we want our bikes to be looked after, or to maintain, we need to look after them. We need to value them. They're really important tools.
I know.
And that's the luxury, maybe, that a trap that you've fallen into from having a bit of that luxury of knowing.
I mean, I just don't like it. I just don't like doing it. But I mean, it's so much easier when I lived at home and Mom and Dad have a house and a drive, and I was able to just put my bike, against the wall, get the hose, and it's just so much easier. It's just space. Like I could enjoy it. I actually enjoyed doing it. I'd come back and I'd do it, and I enjoyed it. It was like therapeutic. But now I just like I live on a busy street. I don't want to be outside, like getting in people's ways on the pavement and things. And it's actually really difficult, for where I live now. So.
There are some little tricks for bike maintenance for flat dwellers, which I'll come to a little bit later on. But I think Sylvie was dying there. She's like, you should look after your bike. You should. How good are you at looking after your bike in the winter, Sylvie?
Sorry?
How good are you at looking after your bike and cleaning it through the winter?
I'm very, very good. I don't like a dirty bike. And I tell you why I don't like a dirty bike, because I don't want to spend money like when the winter ends. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, everything's corroded. This has worn out. This has this. Oh, I should have just like grabbed a little brush and just brushed it off, or like given it a little bit of time, you know, like it almost becomes like part of our routine during winter, I guess. And I'm not a big fan of hose washing. And I'll tell you why. Because apart from you already being like on the road when it's wet with salt, which is going onto your bike, so it's already kind of wearing the grease and a few things that kind of keep your bike going and moving. Then you get a bit of hose and then you start spraying it, and then you take it out even more, right? Depends of how much spray you like. I guess the potency of the hose, how strong it is. But for me, I like to do dry cleaning on my bike, which is not something that everyone wants to hear, because everyone wants to do it a little bit easier, I guess. I guess Vicky can also like have a bit of input on that. But I guess it depends on like the stuff that you notice you prefer. And then I started noticing that if I wash my bike too much, my chain starts getting a little bit corroded. And then I start getting a little bit of corrosion as well in like the bolts. And I'm like, I don't like that. I don't want my bike looking like some rusty, crusty thing. So, you know, like for me is every time you ride, you could like, it's easy. Like, you know, like when it's dry, you grab a little bit of a brush, like I have it right here. And I just literally just go like this, brush it off, bam, 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 done. Don't have to think about it anymore. And it doesn't build up. So in a week's time, I don't have to wash the whole bike because nothing has built up. And then when I'm riding, I'm not hearing any weirdness because I brushed it off.
That's such a good tip. I think loads of people would be really interested to hear that. You can just literally brush it down. And there's a girl here who I think is a girl after your own heart, Kate, Sylvie. Kate says she thinks it's so satisfying cleaning her bike. She can faff about it with it after a ride for longer than actually out riding it. So,
exactly. And then you can get your hands dirty and you can learn about things. And all of a sudden, you know, like the more you learn about biomechanics, the more you want to get involved and the more you want to like keep everything, because you start realizing the difference of when your bike is running 100% smooth and amazing, and when that starts going down. And then you're like, I can hear a noise. When I pedal, I don't pedal nice. I can start seeing like all of this build up in my chain and all of this build up in like my rear cog. And then like this weird noise when I'm pedaling, like it's wet, like it's like, you know what I mean? And that's making you slow, and that's making you go even harder than you should. So for me, it's efficiency. I don't want to work harder than I have to do it. For me, it's like, you know, if I can make something as easy as possible when I ride, I'm there. I'm down.
Yeah.
So good. And Vicky, you've been nodding along a lot with that. Is this a leaf out of your own book?
Yeah, totally. It's we always when I was working in a bike shop in the workshop, we used to be so suspicious of the bikes that came in super clean, because they normally had absolutely no grease in them. They generally, if you look beneath the surface, they were about to fall apart. It was sort of, so yeah. As a mechanic, I tend to keep my bikes like my children and my house. They are clean enough, but not spotless. They're clean in the right places, not pristine. But I don't do cleanliness. Basically, and I completely on the dry brushing. That's a really good way of doing it, because you can just get off most of the dirt. The thing to be aware of is sort of, so chains won't wear particularly from the dirt themselves, but what they'll do is that they then wear away against the cogs. And so it's, again, sort of keeping an eye on the wear on your chain itself. It stops you having to replace your cogs, which are more expensive. So just, keep that. I don't like wet lubes, dry lubes. I quite like smooth is one that I use. And I find it's really good because you can put it on. It's halfway between a wax lube and a regular one. You put it on, leave it for 24 hours, wipe off the excess, and then it protects it for 3 or 4 rides. Because if you're regularly reapplying lube, then it's just attracting more and more dirt and grease. So basically let your bike dry, brush off all the mud, and then just really focus on the bearings. Make sure that the grease there, because as you said, Sylvie, grease attracts dirt, and then water just fires that dirt into the thing that the grease is meant to be protecting.
It becomes sandpaper. Think about it like that.
Yeah, completely.
So
it's a really nice paste.
So it's like this really perfect thing that will start eating away your components. Yeah. So I guess chain maintenance, I think, is a whole topic of how to really, everyone seems to sometimes, well, not everybody. A lot of people seem to get it wrong. A lot of people seem to think that the more lube I apply, the better it's going to be. The more protected my chain is going to be, the more smooth it's going to be. And that's not the case. That's completely the opposite. As Vicky was saying, the more lube you put, the more you attract this dirt, this kind of grittiness of the floor. And it's not just dirt, it's like salt now. So salt really corrodes everything. That's the worst enemy for bikes. So really, for me personally, I like to use wet lube. Just because it would stay there for longer. But it's something important about wet lube is how you apply it. Because if you apply a lot of it, then it becomes this black thing, very, very, very liquidy, very dirty, right? When you touch your chain, that's a good question. When you touch your chain, are you disgusted by touching your chain? Would you touch it?
So who here who's watching is disgusted when they touch their chain? In the audience.
Right, so the answer to that is that you should not feel disgusted by your chain. You should clean your chain. So that doesn't mean degreasing your chain every time. That means grabbing a cloth and rubbing it and rubbing it and rubbing it until there's at the end of the day, the grease, the lube that you put is not for the outside, it's for the inside. Yeah. So, if you apply it properly, really nothing should be in the outside. And when you apply lube, which is something really, really important, I tend to do it. I mean, I'm very extra, but maybe Vicky will back me up on this.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
One drop each little thing. One drop. And then once I go around, because you mark it, you go around it, I spin it a couple of times nice and slowly, and then I grab a rug, and I'm there for about 3 minutes. Yeah. Drying it and cleaning it and drying it and cleaning it and drying it and cleaning it. And then my chain is perfect. For unless it is then I start seeing the difference. I touch it, it's a very dry. You don't want it to be completely dry, that there's nothing on your finger. You want a bit of a mark. You don't want to be disgusted by what you touch with your finger. And so it's that sort of thing. Whenever you see something that is a bit dirty, just wipe it. There shouldn't be anything black, 100% black. There shouldn't be anything 100% collecting somewhere. Nothing should be collecting. You should be able to see the true colors of your components as well.
So one sec. let's just move on to a couple more topics because we're getting loads of questions in from the audience. So I think this is going to be quite a big Q&A session today, which is really good. And to anyone in the audience got any questions about products, looking after your bike in the winter, techniques, do keep them coming, and we're going to be answering them all. I just want to ask some of you guys, some of you maybe live in smaller places. I live in a flat and I keep my bike down in a garage, but I don't have a garden and a hose, a bit like what Charlene was saying earlier, like when you go to your parents' house. It's so much easier to clean your bike when you've got that space to do it. But a little trick that I learned, and maybe the mechanics are going to shake their head or at least tell me how I can do it safely, is going to the petrol station, using the jet wash. You can put £1 in the thing, standing quite far away from the bike so it doesn't blast it too much. It gets the worst of the dirt off my bike before I bring it into my rental flat, which I cannot just bring a muddy bike into the flat and have tyre marks going all over the walls. So that's one of my little tricks. I'd quite like the mechanics, to expand on that. I know that there's some dangers of using jet washes. But what else about living in smaller spaces? Anybody else learn anything? Charlene?
I mean, I've put my bike in the bath before.
In a what?
In the bath.
Great!
Ooh, if I do that, I get killed by my family.
Well, that was before we just got our bathrooms done. Not like that anymore. And when we had an old blue kind of bathroom, and now it's white. So no bikes allowed in the bathroom. But that was a really easy thing for me to do. I put my bikes in the bath and just the shower, because it wasn't a power jet, was good at just getting the initial dirt off. But I'd honestly see now taking that bucket out the front just to and then as you said, Sylvie, just cleaning that chain, it just takes.
Then your chain is really dirty then. You need to maybe replace it, clean it completely, degrease it, and then clean it again.
Think of it as meditation.
Yeah.
To be fair, this is how I feel about stretching.
Bag meditation.
Yeah, it is. It's meditation.
I'd rather go clean my bike, mate.
No.
Talking about maintenance, whether it's maintaining your body or maintaining your bike. Fran, the sorts of cycling you do, you do quite a lot of long distance commuting. Are there any tricks that you've learned over the years when you're riding through salt, grit, rain, that just keeps things easier on your bike but isn't too much stress for you? What sort of things do you do?
I guess the key thing is if you're commuting regularly is hand on heart, I don't wash my bike after every ride. There's just no point, because if you're riding day after day, you're just going to fall out of love with it. So I tend to wash it probably, say, once every couple of weeks, and then it gets a darn good clean and a wash and, proper TLC. But what I would say is if you can get home from a ride and just give it a quick rinse and spray after a really dirty ride, is going to be a lot quicker, because the mud is still going to be quite wet and quite runny, rather than if you let it dry, you're going to have to spend more time cleaning it on a weekend. What I do find interesting is all the mechanics who say and people saying don't use pressure washers, don't use power washers. I race cyclocross. My cross bike gets hosed every half a lap in the depths of winter, and I mean proper jet washed. It's not a problem if you look after your bike. So if you then properly take the bike apart and re-grease and look after all the relevant bearings and hubs and dry them and do them properly. So I accept that for Joe Public, it's is a good idea to not jet wash your bike. But I know there are a lot of us out there that do. And obviously I mentioned earlier that cyclocross ride I did on the weekend where I ended up knee deep in water. The evening, I have to admit, this wasn't done by me, this was done by my partner, but the rest of the day whilst I was cooking dinner, he did take the bikes apart and re-grease, and clean the bottom bracket, because it had been completely submerged. So But yeah, my top tip would be just to try and give it at least a quick hose and a rinse whilst the mud is still wet.
Cool. Sylvie, I'll come to you in a sec. But I'm just aware we've got loads of questions coming in, and there's still a few more topics that I want to cover. Bringing your bike indoors through the winter. Is there anyone here who would leave their bike outdoors?
Oh, outdoors, sorry. This is where it gets confusing. You say bring it indoors. I have a house with a double garage, okay? I still have 3 bikes that live in the house, and that re-greasing was done on the kitchen worktops. I would like to add that, but when you said outside, you did actually mean outside, and no is the answer.
Yeah, and why is that? And I think the reason I really want to get this across is because a lot of people who are getting into cycling will quite happily leave their bikes perhaps outdoors, locked up outside a flat or in a small garden, because that's all the space they have. And you see it quite often when you go through towns, actually, you see bikes locked up outdoors, and it's understandable. But through the winter, what can that do to your bike? Who's going to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's rust. Is a lot of things will perish. You risk sort of, if you've got rain coming down, splashing up dirt and so on. It's really about keeping the grease and so on. If you can at least put a cover over it. I mean, it's something we find with youngsters with their bikes, that they'll just sort of forget them, people forget them, leave them out, and then find that the chain's gone rusty and so on. And it's just sad, because they'll be less inclined to ride them. They'll find, like Sylvie said, like everything becomes harder work. If you've got cheap parts, so like gear cables, if you've got the stainless steel gear cables, you're fine. But if a manufacturer has tried to save money and put a cheap one in, then that itself can rust, and then you find the shifting is a lot harder, and so on. The same with brakes. It's it's really just, it's better if you can, even if you can just put a plastic cover over it. That helps.
And that's it. And you can buy like massive tarpaulins from a hardware store. And I really highly recommend that. You can just weigh it down with some rocks outside, so it really doesn't have to be that costly. And there's also some indoor storage spaces. I know that Vicky, you're going to be trying out something quite soon for space, bringing the bike in.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be trying out the Klug wall-mounted brackets. So those I've seen before, and I'm looking forward to trying them. You can get them different widths for different tyres, and I think that's going to be great. I also really like the colours of them. I'm just a bit sad. I like the orange ones. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that works. And I like the fact that you can use it actually with the bike flat. You can put the front wheels straight into it, and then you can use it as a kind of a bit of a work stand for working on your bike as well, which I think is going to be good.
Yeah, and it's all these little space-saving devices. You know, there's one on the market. They're not the only one. There's all sorts of things like this where you can bring your bike indoors, and especially if you've cleaned your bike before you take it in, you can then turn your bike into a bit of a decorative feature, which I like to believe I've done right over here. So if you like your bike and you can clean it and get it in, there are lots of products on the market where you can bring your bike indoors, and we highly recommend that you do that, or at least say cover it with a tarpaulin. And just before we bring it onto the public Q&A, I want to ask a little bit about tyre pressures. Does anybody change their tyre pressures through the winter? Oh my God, Fran! What do you want to say?
I can't.
No, it's about
I can't.
Being a cyclocrosser, I'm obsessed with tyre pressure. It's quite entertaining. But I think the key is to just consider the roads and the environment that you're riding in, and also what tyres you might have on your bike, what the conditions are. So I would adapt think about that and drop the tire pressure a bit. Not 120 psi, like
never 120.
We've had that conversation before. That's the maximum tire pressure. That doesn't mean that's what you should ride it at.
Yeah, I want to add as well to that. I guess like it depends. What type of tires. It's also like very convenient for you to know the minimum and the maximum PSI of your tires. And maybe like during the summer, because, you know, you have less bumpy rides, let's call it like that, then you want to be a little bit like closer to the maximum PSI. And during the winter, maybe you want to be in the middle, closer to the lowest, the minimum, meaning that you're going to have to pump your tires more often than normal. Because that, like, you know, even if you leave your bike in the side for like 2 weeks or so, that tire, that PSI, that pressure, it will go down. So all of a sudden, you don't want to be riding in 20 PSI, wondering why you're struggling so much and why you're not going anywhere and why you're just bouncing up and down, because that's definitely not nice. And that's also how you get punctures.
And because why is it that when it's raining, you tend to get more punctures?
I feel like everything goes into one place, it starts moving. And so all of the stuff that was spread out before is just in one place. You go over it and everything's there waiting for your tires.
Yeah.
So you just get punches all the time.
Because there's actual reasoning to it. It's not just like one of those sod's law things where it's like, it's raining, and I've got a puncture. It's like, we've probably got that puncture because it's raining.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are some little tricks that you can do to puncture proof. You can never completely puncture proof the bike. Best you can do to set yourselves up. All right, cool. Actually, I just want to ask you, Vicky, one question about different types of adaptive bikes. I know that there's some sort of community clubs and things where bikes can be used for people with different abilities through the winter. Just tell us a little bit about that, how are those bikes maintained, and what about people who may be on the back of a trailer? Do they not just get really, really cold because they're not pedaling?
Yes. Yeah, it's that was something I hadn't taken in at all, was the fact that my daughter was going to freeze. But yeah, so you do need to make sure that they've got plenty of coats, gloves, hats and so on, because although they are pedaling, they're not necessarily pedaling as much as you are. And also, I mean, for example, with my daughter, her circulation isn't great. So she generally gets colder anyway. So it's a case of knowing the people. In terms of where you're riding, often these clubs, like the bikes that we use, are on a riverside path. So as long as it's not wet, as long as it's not flooded, which can happen sometimes in the winter, as long as it's not flooded and icy, then actually it's great to be able to ride with the kids, because with the young people, because it's flat, it's tarmacked, and you don't need to worry too much at all about the same problems that we have with the dirt and so on if you're on forest trails. In terms of tires and maintenance and things, it's exactly the same as a regular bike. It's just a case of making sure you've got really puncture-proof tires. So I've got Marathon Pluses on my daughter's pull along, which are really nice and sturdy. Actually, while we're just going back to tire pressures and things, if you aren't riding your bike very much and you let the tire pressure go down, you can find you get cracks in the tire itself, and that then can cause problems, and you need to replace them more often. So yeah, keep an eye on tire pressure, definitely.
Thank you. Some good tips there. So we're going to move it to the public Q&A now. So do keep those questions coming in. I also want to see in the chat, how many of you feel like you're a good bike maintenance person? Are you someone that really looks after your bike, or are you a bad one? Charlene, I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you. Being a host, I can point my finger. It's great. So just in the comments, just give yourself a little good or a bad. We'll do a little poll about how the people watching this, whether people are the sorts of people that look after their bikes or not. So goods and bads in the comment whilst we go to the public Q&A. So Margaret asked, how often should you apply lube? Is it after every ride? And actually, just one more thing I want to say, we're going to lean very heavily on the mechanics on this, but Charlene and Fran, if you've got any anecdotes or disaster stories or anything like that you want to throw in, you're welcome. So,
Vicky, do you want to do it? Should I do it?
you go if you're off the mic, and we'll probably do it alternatively. Go on.
Right. So how often? As I said before, you touch your chain, or you can look at your chain, right? Is it very, very dry? You know, if you touch it like this, and then literally like barely anything on your finger, it should be just like tiny little marks, nothing massive. It shouldn't be dirty. It shouldn't be never after every ride. That's only on the type of lube that you use. So if you use dry lube, that's a kind of waxy lube that then you put on for kind of when it's summer, when there's no rain much, you know, you want it to be like clean and again, guess a little bit more efficient. But I'm not a big fan of it, just because if it does rain, you're going to have to clean your chain and you're going to have to lube it again, and then you're going to have to wait. And then I don't like waiting. You know, so for me, it's about wet lube. I really like using like Mock-Off. I'm just a big fan of them. Like nothing's really gonna go wrong with that. Like wet lube. And yeah, as I said, like when you do put it, it's one drop in each little thing. One drop. You mark it. You mark where you start. Once you start pedaling backwards, you start putting one drop at a time, and then once you do that, pedal backwards just a little bit, and then grab the rug for like about 3 minutes and clean, and then let it settle for like about 10 minutes or so. So maybe do it the day before the ride. Awesome. And it should be really good.
And as Sylvie's such a fan of Mock-Off as well, she's actually managed to get them to agree to give out some samples. So if you tune into our session on the 18th of December, you could be a lucky person being able to try out some Mock-Off as well. We'll get them sent out to you. So make sure you tune in to that episode. Vicky, I want to ask you this one from Irene. What products would you use? I'm not very good on bike mechanics. So what sort of products would somebody who's getting into cycling really need to have in their kit bag, I suppose, for the winter?
Yeah, so it's so I think the tools it's good to use well-made ones. I do work with Park Tools, so obviously I'm going to say them, but they are great. They're well-made. I've got a little bag that I did actually make myself. This is what I take out on each ride. And I've basically got a really good little multi-tool that's got it's got a chain breaker on there. I have 3 tire levers because that's the easiest way to get tires off. I then have a little puncture repair kit, and yeah, that's really great. And then sort of a spare hanger, quick link, and some zip ties. That's really what I carry with me. And actually, you could do most of your bike maintenance at home with that. In terms of products, I think a lube, as we've discussed, it's worth using a bike cleaner. If you're going to use water to clean your bike, then get a proper dedicated bike cleaner that's not going to have salt in. You can't use things like Fairy Liquid or whatever because they're not designed to go near bikes. So Mock-Off or another brand of bike cleaner. And then just a regular grease, like a bearing grease, unless you've got carbon. If you've got a carbon frame, then, or anything with carbon, when you have carbon coming into contact with metal, you always use a carbon paste, because carbon, you can't tighten onto it. It has pressures, and so if you use a carbon paste, then that gives you extra resistance and extra grip for the pressure you're applying to it. So for your seat posts, handlebars, and what have you. So I'd start with Allen keys, a good multi-tool is a great present, and it's a good place to start, and that's got everything in it.
For sure. Can I add into that?
Yeah.
Very quickly. A rug, yay! A brush, yay! Like a £1 store. I'm telling you, £1 store. You go, like, something that looks like this is a little bit dirty, it's a bit old.
It should be.
A brush, any sort of brush. I like the ones that's kind of like, the ones that they tend to use for the toilets that kind of like are messy everywhere. Those are very good because they get to like the places that you don't want to get in with. It hurts when sometimes you touch yourself with like the chain and whatever. This is very good. And I'll tell you what you use this for. This is also like, I think it's W40. So basically, like, you can spray it into your boats, and then that stops them stop it from being rusty. And from kind of, it keeps them kind of lubricated and clean. I also tend to sometimes, once I've cleaned my bike with this sort of products, which I'm going to talk about, basically when you have a spray, you never, ever, ever spray it on your bike. Always spray it on your cloth first. You spray it, bam, 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 spray it, and that's how you clean your bike, right? Never, always be very careful with every moving part. If you spray that into your chain, you're degrazing your chain, and then it's gonna get very dry and it's gonna damage it. Then if you spray it next to your bearings, where the bearings tend to be, it's like basically little balls that kind of move, make everything moves like, in this direction. So everything to do with your handlebars, everything to do with the pedaling, everything that connects one thing with the other. That's where your bearings are. So be very careful with spraying anything around that area, because then you're kind of removing the grease that is protecting it, right? Unless you know how to take your bike apart, cleaning, and then re-greasing it, then it's better not to do that, because then you start eating away your parts. And another thing that I recommend, but every now and then, right? Because this is kind of like a nasty product. So you can use this to kind of clean your chain, clean your drive chain. So the big thing that kind of moves the bike forward in where your cranks are, and then the smaller ones in the back. You have to be very careful. You have to remove everything and then spray it, leave it there with some gloves, and then kind of water it down. Because if it gets in your hands like it did with me, you would then end up having like a really nasty rash, and you don't want that. So learn from my mistakes as well. So that's pretty much it. Everything that Vicky said is very important. Your Allen keys, because the more you start moving and the grease removes, then it's very, very a key thing. Right. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Just so we can make sure we've got time to get through all these questions. Sarah says she doesn't have a chain. What about caring for a bike with a belt drive? So that's quite unusual. So has either of you had experience doing that? And can you explain to the public what that is?
I've only just seen it. And I don't think there's much to it than to just like keep it clean. I'm not too sure. I don't know if Vicky would know more than me. You don't really put anything on it, do you?
No, I haven't come across one since I was training, in all fairness. It's stretch is about the only thing that you get with belts. But it's not something you come across very regularly.
And do you have to, it tends to be like you just have to replace it if it does a stretch, don't you? Because then it's not gonna
it's out of sync.
Its shape. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's they're a funny one, because in some ways people think that they're better because they require less maintenance. But on the other hand, when they go, that's it.
They go.
I came across one. There was a guy when I was training to be a mechanic. He was going around the world cycling, so he decided to qualify as a mechanic. And bizarrely, he had chosen that to have the belt, and it meant that he'd always have to carry one with him, because you couldn't guarantee that you'd get one in some far-flung corner of the world. So it was a really it was a strange decision. I never did find out how he got on, actually. I'd be fascinated to know. He should have made it round by now.
Okay, next question. Karen says, my husband worried about me being stuck on a small lane in the dark trying to repair a puncture. So we brought a spray that is supposed to seal and pump the tyre back up. Is that okay?
That's I wonder if she's talking about a CO2 can. I think that might be, or I haven't come across a spray that seals it itself. So where I've got a tubeless tire on my mountain bike, I have these sort of plugs which you can use, and then I use a CO2 can to reinflate the tire. But equally, if I'm using an inner tube, then you could always fix the inner tube, replace it, and then use the CO2. So I'm not sure if that's what Karen was describing.
Is it green?
Sometimes it could be the slime film,
like punch a liquid thing.
Yeah, you can get.
I'm not a big fan of it. No, just I think that the easiest thing for you to do is to, I don't know if you agree with me, Vicky, but like the already glued patches that they just so, or just literally carry with you like another inner tube. And then you can literally just pop it through and get yourself like a small pump, and then just go to the side, and then nice and quickly, practice in your house. You can practice in your house. So then when it does happen in the road, you're efficient and you're fast and you know what you're doing.
My top tip, there's one very quick top tip. If you do get a puncture, before you remove your inner tube, leave the valve in the rim, inflate it slightly, and find out where the hole is on the inner tube. Then you know exactly where to look on your tire to find the thing that's caused the puncture, because they can be absolutely tiny, and you think there's nothing there. You inflate your tire and you've got the same problem again. Yeah. So leave your valve in place until you know where your hole is.
Giggity. I think that's it. We're pretty much on time. Oh, Fran, did you want to add something before we go into
I want to add something too.
I want to add a top tip about valve cores. Is to make wrong way. Is to make sure that they're tight before you go out on a ride. We had to stop and save somebody this weekend who couldn't pump her tyre back up because her valve core kept unscrewing. So you can either do it at home with pliers before you go out, or you can use a proper valve core tool. Because otherwise it's a nightmare. Every time you unscrew your pump, it'll unscrew your valve core and your tyre will deflate.
It's good to mention that there's two screws in your valve. The one that's like for the air, and the other one. There's two, right?
What's the other one?
The other one is the one that Fran is talking about, and then the little one that you can unscrew. So basically, that's the thing that puts that together. So the top of it is the thing that you can press, and you can let the air out, and then let air in. But if the body that screws into the big one, right, to then allow you to use that little bit there. I'm just like, if it's unscrewed, then it's never going to happen. You're just never going to be able to get air in.
Yeah, and I think something that you commented on there just a moment ago is really important, where you can actually on YouTube, there's loads of videos on the Cycling UK YouTube list, there's videos on how to do this stuff. And things like replacing an inner tube, it's not even fixing a puncture, it's just replacing an inner tube is so quick. And once you know how to do it, it's so easy, and it will get you out of so much trouble if you know how to do that. So as been suggested, practice it at home, and then you'll be ready for if it ever happens when you're out on the road. And it's once you've done it a couple of times, it's really not as daunting as it seems the first time. Right, so we're moving on to that section where you guys pick a comment and talk about it. Oh, Fran, that is so nice. Cheers. Oh, Charlene. You're spoiled at work. So cool. So I'm going to ask you guys to have a look through the comments and then just pick one out, whether it's a question that you feel hasn't been answered, or it's a comment that you agree with or reminds you of something, whatever it is. And we're going to start in 3 seconds with Charlene.
Let's go. So Tracy Monroe, I'm bad with my mountain bike. It's always muddy still. I can really relate to this. But what have we learned from today, Tracy? We need to wash our bikes, and we've got loads of tips from these wonderful ladies. Also, just want to put out there, this topic this week is the reason I love track cycling so much. I've just realised I just am a track velodrome rider, and I had to ride the road, but no cleaning the bike in there. So yeah, I think I got through this week on the skin of my teeth, didn't I?
Track cycling is like the complete opposite of cyclocross. Track cycling, never clean your bike ever. Cyclocross, clean your bike every 5 minutes during a race.
If I had someone to clean my bike for me, I think I'd quite like it. Fran, come and clean my bike for me if I entered a race.
You're on.
Amazing. Oh, it's very realistic. If someone else isn't okay, go on. Fran, what comment did you see?
Sophie Gordon, was actually a question. Sophie Gordon said, how do you find the motivation to clean the bike when you've been out for an evening ride, it's late, still raining, you're wet, muddy and want a hot shower? The key thing there is I always make myself a cup of tea. So I get in, I open the back door, I put the kettle on, I change my shoes, so take my cycling shoes off. I've got like boots that I use for cleaning the bike. I put those on and I do it in my kit because your kit is already wet and muddy, and you take a cup of tea out with you and think, if I do it now, it's going to take me 15 minutes. If I do it tomorrow, it's going to take me 45 minutes. And then once you've done it, you have your shower, you can wash your clothes, and you're feeling quite smug because your bike's clean and ready for its next trip out.
Interesting. I always had this argument with my family, actually, because I was the other side of that. I was a bit like, why do now what you can do later? And would prefer to attack it the next morning when I was there in my dry clothes, all cozy, and I'd take my time over it, and I'd be warm, and I didn't already have cold fingers. So I would prefer to just put it off until the next day and then do it when I had a bit of time, daylight, and was nice and warm and dry.
But we never have time though, do we? We would always, the following day, I would find something else to do that was more exciting. And it's different attitudes, so isn't it? Because if you know you're better motivated to do it tomorrow, then maybe that's a better thing for you. But I know if it's not done at that minute, it's not going to get done until a week later. Can't be bothered.
Cool. All right, Vicky, what question or comment stood out to you?
So mine's from Zoe Crossley Woodman. Definitely about using good products on it after cleaning and before you ride next time. Lube it. I like using good products on my bike. It feels like a bit of pampering for the bike, like you would for yourself, and it just makes you smile. And a lot of the products smell really nice. Don't think I should say that, should I?
Don't eat them.
No, don't eat them. Don't sniff them. But if you are in the vicinity of them while you're using them, no, it's just looking after your investment, basically. It's it feels like you're doing something good.
Great. So I've just seen there's another question come in from Sarah. Is there an absolute minimum cleaning maintenance that needs to be done?
I can answer that. As I was going to say that no one asked the question, what happens when my brakes stop working when I'm riding? No one asked that question, and that's the thing that everyone seems to come into the workshop to be like, hey, I've been riding and all of a sudden I can't brake anymore. It's like, what's going on? Basically, the more, for me, safety's first. You can deal with things making noise and things being dirty for a while, but things that braking is such an important thing that gets overlooked. So basically, when there's, during winter, because there's rain, the more you brake, the more those pads start wearing out, and it starts becoming like this really slippery liquid, right? And it starts becoming like a buildup on your rim and on the pads itself, right? So I recommend that being your main thing every time you ride. If you are going to clean something, that's the main thing. Even if it's dry, you clean it every couple of weeks. When it's been wet, you clean it every time. And you can clean it with alcohol, which is pretty good to take that off. You're going to clean the pads with a bit of a rug. You're going to proper clean that. Make sure that there's no kind of leftover anything there. And in the rims, that literally when you touch them, you shouldn't be disgusted by it. It should be literally you're going to eat your food from your rim. So yeah, that's kind of the main things. Whenever you're having those issues, is about the braking surface and the braking pad. So make sure that you clean it. Make sure that you don't put any grease on it, because that means that you're just not going to brake anymore. And maybe like when you were riding, there was grease in the floor, it went into your rim, you're not braking anymore, right? So just make sure that you're taking care of that.
Cool. Brilliant. Well, thank you, everybody. Let's wrap this up here. This has been really good. We've had loads of questions and comments in, so really hope the audience have got a lot out of it. And I think it'd be fair to say that if you do have any extra questions after this, particularly about specific topics that you think our guests could answer, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer it for you. You can see their Instagram details or other contacts earlier on. And of course, you can contact us here at Cycling UK, Women's Festival at cyclinguk.org. This was hosted by us, which we're a charity making cycling safer, easier and more accessible for everyone in the UK. And this is what these sessions have been about a little bit. So again, really hope you've enjoyed it. Join us next week because we're going to be talking about motivation, how to motivate yourself to get out. I mean, it's one thing motivating yourself to clean your bike, but if you can't even motivate yourself to get out on your bike in the first place, well, maybe that's a little bit premature. So we're going to be going into that this time next week, 1 p.m. Make sure you see us there. Looking forward to it. Bye.
Bye.